So in today's video, we're going to tackle the intellectual revolution made by Galileo Galilei. So here are the questions that we're going to answer. First, what is the intellectual revolution all about? Second, who are the key figures in the revolution? 3. How did the revolution advance modern science and scientific thinking at the time? And lastly, what controversies met the revolution?
What is the intellectual revolution all about?
From the 16th to 17th century, this period was the range of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution paved way for a modern perspective, take, and understanding of science. This revolution grounded the usage of systematic experimentation and research method. Because of the objective lens that this method provides, developments in modern science such as mathematics, chemistry, physics, biology, and astronomy were founded and established. These transformed the society's perception on natural phenomena. The Copernicus revolution that introduced the heliocentric theory at our last meeting was part of the scientific revolution. Scientific revolution happened mainly because of these reasons. Number 1, collaboration. The next is experimental method. The third one is the legacy of existing scientific philosophies. And lastly, because of academic publishing. From the Greeks that focus on explaining things on why phenomena happens, this revolution focused on explaining how a phenomena occurs.
Who are the key figures in the scientific revolution? I will talk about three key figures, namely Galileo Galilei, Francis Bacon, and René Descartes. And Galileo Galilei, with the exception of Sir Isaac Newton, Galileo was the most influential scientist of the scientific revolution. In 1604, he showed that the distant and, according to Aristotelian cosmology, stagnant area of space was not necessarily static. By no motion of the stars could be observed. Galileo declared in 1612 that he had determined that the sun itself was spinning based on the discovery of dark spots on the sun. One of his first disagreement with the church arose as a result of this declaration, as the church found the conclusions to be contradictory to church doctrine. Galileo was warned by the Inquisition in 1616 to abandon these opinions. Copernicus' works were suspended until corrected a few days later. He invented the telescope and the microscope after studying physics and especially the laws of gravity and motion. In his 1630 masterwork, Dialogue on the Two Chief Systems of the World, a book made by Galileo, Galileo merged his laws of physics with observations made with his telescope to defend the heliocentric Copernican theory of the cosmos and reject the Aristotelian system. Galileo's problems were brought to the head by the Dialogue. The book's sale was banned in August 1632 and its contents were investigated by a special commission. Galileo was found guilty of blasphemy and was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life after signing a recantation of these theories. Francis Bacon. He is one of the great philosophers of the scientific movement. His theories on science, reasoning, and ethics, as well as the communication and connection of different fields of science, which he introduced in his work Novum Organum, have remained influential in the scientific world to this day. And René Descartes. Descartes was one of the scientific revolution's most brilliant thinkers. Descartes, the father of deductive logic, was a disappointment as a practical scientist, but a mathematical triumph, uniting number and type in his work Geometry, which explained how the motion of a point could be graphically traced by comparing its direction to planes of reference. Aside from Sir Isaac Newton and Galileo Galilei, these two were also notable scientists from the scientific revolution.
So how did Galileo advance modern science and scientific thinking at the time? So in July 1609, Galileo learned about telescopes made by Dutch eyeglass makers, in which he then built his own. In a later month, in 1609, one night Galileo decided to point his telescope in the sky, where he observed the moon and the planet Venus, where he observed that Venus has similar phases like the moon. And in 1613, he also discovered that Jupiter had revolving moons around itself but not on Earth. So discovering such patterns in the solar system, he concluded the planets revolve and rotates around the sun, supporting the theory of heliocentrism by Copernicus. So he also formulated the law of falling bodies, where he states that all bodies or objects fall with the same acceleration independent of their masses, as long as there is an absence of air resistance. So this theory of Galileo is interpreted by Isaac Newton to formulate his law of inertia. This theory was further strengthened when astronauts from the Apollo 15 mission landed on the moon and tested if a hammer and a feather will fall at the same time, in which it did, making the experiment successful. So other discoveries, according to the books he published, in operations of geometrical and military compass, Galileo revealed his expertise in experimentation and practical technological applications, in which this changed the process of testing theories, as before it was based through observations in nature, unlike what Galileo and most scientists today who set up their own experiments to gather results and data. Second, the Starry Messenger, where he revealed his discoveries and observations through his telescope, and the Discourse on Bodies in Water, where he refuted the Aristotelian explanation of why objects float in water, where Galileo argued that it's not the flat shape that influences flotation, but it is the weight of the object in relation to the water that it displaces.
Lastly, what controversies met by the revolution? After answering those questions about Galileo's intellectual revolution, let's now tackle the conflict he had against the Catholic Church. According to the Catholic Church, the idea of heliocentric solar system was not acceptable. It is not acceptable by the Church, as they also revolted against the idea and theory in Copernicus' book that the Earth revolved around the sun. They disapprove this theory because they believe that the earth is at the center, not the sun, as based on the Holy Scriptures. They also wanted that Galileo abandon his own revolution because they don't want people to believe in scientists' claims. They want all to base every theories and claims to the Bible. Galileo renounced the idea, thus sparing his life. The renouncement of his idea lessened the penance of Galileo, resulting to lighter punishment compared to the death sentence. The result of this was the geocentric solar system. After he renounced the idea of the earth revolving around the sun, he then insisted in believing the geocentric solar system. In similarity to what the Holy Scriptures state, that the earth is what at the center of the solar system and not the sun, and that every planet and stars revolve around it. These circumstances clearly depicts science versus faith, that from the earliest time it is already existing. Church and scientists going back to each other protecting what they believe and what they have as an opinion. Until now, this kind of debates are still circulating as to the origin of man, whether it's revolution or the creation of God Himself. Science revolves around the investigation of things and matters to claim proofs in saying so, while on the other hand, Church believe almost everything on what is written in the Holy Scriptures.